Good evening, I'm Nora O'Donnell, and thank you for being with us tonight. We are just 4 days away from the Iowa caucuses, and there are a number of major stories that are of top concern to the American people and will impact the race for the White House, starting with the most important issue to voters, the economy. And we learned today inflation was up last month more than expected. The new data out today shows one of the biggest reasons is housing costs. So we're going to look at what that means ahead for your wallet. Plus, the immigration crisis remains the top of mind for voters as they make their voices heard in the 2024 election cycle. Tonight, we have an in-depth look at the strain in the classroom as tens of thousands of migrants cross the border and their children enter public schools. And then the other big headline today, former President Donald Trump was not on the campaign trail, but inside a courtroom tonight, his outburst at the prosecutor and the judge and what the outcome of that $370 million civil fraud trial could mean for his real estate empire. So let's begin with the economy. Inflation jumped in unexpectedly today, ticking up slightly to an annual rate of 3.4%. CBS's Jolene Kent will start us off tonight talking to voters who believe that lawmakers aren't doing enough to help the middle class.
Las Vegas mortgage broker Joan Weber says the economy is not working for her or her customers hunting for home loans.
The majority of people that are coming in today have way more credit card debt than they did 4 or 5 years ago. And we tell them, well, you don't qualify because you have too much debt.
Weber, a Republican, says the stubbornly high cost of living means her company processes fewer mortgage applications.
The last 2 years have been the worst years of our 10 years. I had to cancel my health care 2 years ago because it was $1,700 a month. That's almost as much as my mortgage payment.
While inflation is off the highs of 2022, monthly budget items have continued to soar. Rent was up 6.2% last year. Auto insurance skyrocketed 20%, and dining out jumped 5.2%.
If you were to describe the economy right now in one word, how would you describe it?
Painful. It's painful to go to the grocery store. It's painful to go to the gas pump.
But the view from the White House?
Really good, but lots of work to do on behalf of American families.
Lael Brainerd is director of the National Economic Council. She's the president's top advisor on the economy. We brought her this question from Weber.
What are they doing to fix the economy? If it is so great, why does it need fixing?
What's your response to that?
Yeah, so we have seen inflation come down by 2/3. There are certain goods where they still remain too expensive for Americans. We still need to do a lot of work to get health care to be more affordable. I don't know why, but Republicans have been resisting those efforts to bring costs down.
You're saying that partially why inflation is so persistent, it's the fault of the Republicans?
I'm saying that we're working really hard to bring costs down in the areas that matter most to Americans. And in some cases, we really need Congress to work with us.
Back in Nevada, Weber just wants results.
I want this fighting to stop in Washington, D.C. It's like mom and dad fighting, and we're all the kids are suffering. Our country is so divided.
And Jolene Kent joins us now. So how does this inflation report that's out today impact what may happen with interest rates ahead?
Exactly. That's a great question. Inflation ticked up more than Wall Street was expecting. And so you can be sure the Federal Reserve is watching this so closely, trying to figure out when to time that first cut, which could come this spring. Now, 2 members of the Federal Reserve have publicly expressed hesitation about cutting rates too soon. But the Fed is also very mindful about not cutting rates too close to the general election to avoid seeming partisan, Nora.
Everyone wants to know when those rates are going to get cut. Jolene Kent, thank you so much. All right, former President Donald Trump took time off the campaign trail today for closing arguments in his civil fraud trial in New York City, where he is accused of falsifying financial documents for a decade. CBS's Robert Costa is outside the courthouse.
With his businesses in New York at risk, and after a long day in court, former President Donald Trump arrived at one of his New York properties to speak to reporters.
We have our best poll numbers, we have the best everything despite this, and maybe because of this.
With just days before the Iowa caucuses, Trump says his legal challenges here in New York and elsewhere are now part of the campaign trail.
Are you planning to show up in court?
Yeah, I want to go to all of my trials.
Thursday saw the closing arguments over the extent of fraud in the New York civil case. Judge Arthur Engoron, who has already concluded Trump and his two sons have defrauded banks and companies by inflating assets, is now weighing the scope of penalties. An explosive scene unfolded in the courtroom as Trump spoke up and veered outside the bounds of what the judge said he could say, lashing out and making false accusations against the judge and the New York Attorney General. "This is a fraud on me. What's happened here, sir, is a fraud on me," Trump claimed. "You can't listen for more than 1 minute. This has been a persecution," he directed at Engoron, prompting the judge to cut him off and tell Trump's attorneys to control your client. And while New York State attorneys finished their closing arguments, Trump was already gone, pumping his fists as supporters cheered him at his 40 Wall Street building. New York State Attorney General Letitia James.
This case is about the facts and the law. And Mr. Donald Trump violated the law.
Trump told me he does plan to attend all of his upcoming trials, civil and criminal, state and federal. That's a remark that could have a real impact on the campaign calendar and take Trump away from those key battleground states as he spends time in the courtroom. Nora?
Yep. There's a number of trials coming up on different fronts. Yeah, Robert Costa, thank you so much. Well, the economy is one of the main topics of conversation ahead of the Iowa caucuses, now just 4 days away, but it's not the only one. CBS's Ed O'Keefe is in Ames, Iowa, where he heard what's top of mind in the Hawkeye State.
The borders need to be closed.
Here in Iowa, a top issue of concern for Republican voters is the future of immigration and border security.
Yeah, the border is a big issue.
Open border is not a good thing.
Candidates speak about it frequently.
The border is a disaster, the worst border in history.
And offer solutions.
Instead of catch and release, we're going to go to catch and deport.
But some use terms that vilify undocumented immigrants.
We have a program to transport illegal aliens to sanctuary jurisdictions.
Nationwide, Americans are increasingly concerned about the situation at the U.S.-Mexico border. Nearly half say it's a crisis. The issue is a long-standing concern for Republicans, but there's increased worry among Democrats and independents. The reality here is that Iowa's 3 million residents are overwhelmingly white, and the state's strong economy needs immigrant labor.
Iowans, especially here, would have a very difficult time having anything to eat at dinner time without immigrants, because immigrants are the ones who process the meat, who farm the fields, who cook the food.
Brenda Rodriguez, who fled an abusive relationship in Mexico, has lived in the state for nearly 30 years.
We did it so many years being under the shadows, and I'm done.
So when you hear these candidates who are running say that people who've come illegally have to go home, what do you think of that?
I deserve a chance to stay. If I'm paying my taxes and I'm not doing anything, I don't think I'm a bad person that the people from Iowa don't want me here.
Could Iowa run without immigrants like you?
I don't think so.
With just 4 days remaining until the caucuses, the remaining Republican candidates like Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis will be holding big campaign events like this one, trying to find those last-minute undecided voters. Former President Donald Trump is set to be back here holding rallies by the weekend. Nora?
Ed O'Keefe on the campaign trail there in Ames. Thank you so much. Now to some breaking news out of the Middle East. The United States and the United Kingdom have launched attacks on Iranian-backed Houthi rebels inside Yemen. Now, this is in response to repeated Houthi attacks on cargo ships and tankers in the Red Sea. CBS's Nancy Cordes has the latest from the White House.
Nora, these major strikes were carried out by the U.S. and U.K. jointly, and they were assisted by at least 4 other countries, including Canada and Australia. The targets were drone and missile launch sites in Houthi-controlled Yemen. And this marks the first time the U.S. has struck Yemen since the Israel-Hamas war began back in October. The U.S. has been warning these Iran-backed Houthis that it would hit back after 27 attacks on international shipping in the Red Sea since November. In fact, just on Tuesday, the U.S. Navy had to shoot down 21 Houthi missiles and drones that were fired from Yemen. Those Houthi missiles, by the way, are provided by Iran. Now, the Houthis say their strikes on ships are retaliation for Israeli strikes in Gaza. But a coalition of world leaders, including the U.S. and the U.K., they say these commercial vessels have nothing to do with the conflict. And it isn't just the Houthis that have been targeting commerce in the region. Just today, a Greek oil tanker that was on its way to Turkey was seized by Iran in the Gulf of Oman. And incidents like this are fueling fears, Nora, that this conflict could escalate and eventually draw the U.S. into direct confrontation with Iran.
All right, Nancy Cordes with that breaking news out of the White House. Thank you. Tonight, another major winter storm system threatening much of the country. Snow fell in parts of Arizona and Nevada today, while the South braces for more severe weather. Let's bring in meteorologist Mike Bettis. He's with our partners at the Weather Channel. Good evening, Mike.
Nora, good evening. This next major storm has many facets to it, including severe weather across the South. We just had numerous tornadoes touch down a couple of days ago across the South. And now notice the forecast shows a larger area could be impacted tonight through the day tomorrow, from Texas all the way to the Carolinas. The storms will hit while many people are sleeping overnight tonight. And yes, it does include a tornado threat that will last through the evening tomorrow and extend down into Florida as well. Then there's the winter side of all this, a major blast of wind and snow from the plains across the Midwest. Cities like Des Moines, Milwaukee, Chicago, Detroit will get hit. The blowing snow with winds 50 to 60 miles an hour could create true blizzard conditions here around the Great Lakes. A foot to a foot and a half centered around Milwaukee as well as Chicago, rain to the south. After all of that, Nora, now we're watching the coldest air of the season filter in. Record low temperatures expected from Montana all the way to the Gulf Coast.
Mike Bettis, thank you. The president's son, Hunter Biden, was in a Los Angeles courtroom today, pleading not guilty to 9 federal tax charges. A plea deal to avoid possible prison time fell apart last summer, which led to an indictment on allegations of avoiding to pay nearly $1.5 million in taxes. Yesterday, Biden ignited chaos on Capitol Hill when he made a surprise appearance at a hearing where lawmakers debated holding him in contempt for defying a subpoena. Today marks the end of an era in the NFL. Bill Belichick is parting ways with the New England Patriots, a team he coached for 24 years and led to 6 Super Bowl championships. Belichick's 333 career wins are just 14 short of the all-time record. CBS's James Brown tonight on Belichick's legacy and his possible future game plan.
For me, this is a day of, gratitude and celebration.
It was as graceful an exit as possible. Longtime Patriots coach Bill Belichick and owner Robert Kraft called the decision to part ways amicable.
Coach Belichick will forever be celebrated as a legendary sports icon.
And after unprecedented success, including 6 Super Bowl titles, recent years found the team in a slump over the last 4 seasons.
I'm thrilled to be part of this organization and to be able to have the opportunity to lead this team.
It was nearly a quarter century ago when Belichick first took the reins, and the beginnings of a dynasty. A brilliant tactician and strategist, and he was paired with arguably the greatest quarterback of all time for 20 seasons. Today, Tom Brady on social media, "I could never have been the player I was without you, Coach Belichick." Yet there was controversy, Deflategate, a sign-stealing scandal, but they were short-lived. What does live on is Belichick's record. In just the past 24 hours, 2 coaching legends have now left their iconic teams. Nick Saban stepping down at Alabama, Belichick departing the Patriots. Saban is retiring. Belichick has indicated he still wants to coach. Wherever he takes his talents, he made it clear where his heart lies.
There's so many fond memories and thoughts that I think about the Patriots and I'll always be a Patriot.
And JB is here with us. Well, it's good to see Coach Belichick in a tie and not in his hoodie. But is he hanging up that headset just yet?
Absolutely not. He's only 15 wins away from becoming the all-time winningest coach in NFL history. There are those who say that's important to him. And just as he told his team, do your job, he's still able to do his job.
We'll be watching. JB, always good to have you.
Yes,
Thank
ma'am.
you. A woman who survived a deadly avalanche at a California ski resort is sharing her heart-pounding story. That's next. A woman who was buried alive under a deadly avalanche in California yesterday was back on the ski slopes today and telling her harrowing survival story to CBS's Carter Evans.
As rescuers frantically search for signs of life, one of 4 people buried in the snow is Janet He, swept away by the avalanche with no warning.
I just screamed
almost all the way. And at some point, I kind of feel like, oh, this is it? Because
But your
I can
head was
wiggle.
buried.
Yeah, my head was buried. My whole body was buried.
The avalanche covered an area about the size of a football field, and Janet's husband used his ski poles to poke through the snow, searching for her.
And I yelling her name, and she's not there.
She says her face mask provided a pocket of air so she could breathe, and minutes felt like hours.
And I heard somebody say, "No worry, I got you." So,
What was that like?
so I think that was the best voice I heard in my life.
This was just a stranger?
Yes, it's a stranger.
2 others who were buried also survived, but 66-year-old Kenneth Kidd didn't make it. Today, explosions echoed through the area as teams created smaller, controlled avalanches to prevent another big one, reassuring to Janet He, who's headed back to the slopes.
I definitely don't think like this event can prevent me from skiing.
Now, massive storms dumping heavy snow on drought-stricken land are part of the problem, and the director of the National Avalanche Center says this area is prone to avalanches at an increased risk over the next couple of weeks. Nora?
What an interview and a story. Carter Evans on the slopes tonight. Thank you. America's public schools are struggling with the influx of migrant students. Our in-depth report on the immigration crisis is next. We continue our in-depth look at the crisis at the southern border. New York City estimates caring for asylum seekers will cost $12 billion over 3 years. For tonight's Eye on America, CBS's Omar Villafranca looks at how it's impacting schools.
Last year, Miriam and Miguel, along with their 7-year-old son Jordan, traveled more than 3,000 miles from Ecuador to the U.S.-Mexico border. For safety, they didn't want us using their last name. The family landed in New York City, where Jordan started his educational journey. At PS 51 Elementary School in Manhattan, Jordan is one of 34,000 migrant kids enrolled in New York City schools in the past 18 months.
Who is this? Say, Grandma. Grandma.
Their first lesson comes in Liz Pearson's English as a New Language, or ENL class.
Some of them have surprisingly a lot of languages or different languages, and some of them are starting at 0.
How do you get them to kind of latch on?
A lot of smiling and laughing to make them feel comfortable.
Some lawmakers are worried about overcrowded classrooms and the cost immigration has on education. The move has not been easy for this young family.
Lo más difícil es que no les entiendo porque solo hablan inglés y no tengo amigos con quien jugar.
Yo le he preguntado cuando viene de la escuela, me dice, ¿cómo estás? Estoy bien. ¿Qué tal te fue? Estoy bien, me sabe decir. No me dice lo que ahorita estoy escuchando.
Adding to the challenge, they had to vacate their shelter room 2 weeks ago.
Desde a sufrir, se vino a sufrir y más que todos nosotros y hacerle sufrir a nuestros hijos.
Hola, mijo.
Unable to find work or a place to live, the family is starting over again in Minneapolis, hoping for another chance at the American dream. Omar Villafranca, CBS News, New York.
Coming up, a best-selling author's advice on unlocking your potential. That's next. Finally tonight, with the new year comes new resolutions. So we sat down with best-selling author Adam Grant to talk about becoming our best selves. So how does someone unlock their hidden potential?
Well, I think the mistake that a lot of people make is they feel like imposters. They walk around thinking, you know what, other people may believe I'm capable of certain things, but I know this is not for me. What they don't realize is that imposter syndrome, feeling like other people are overestimating you, is actually a sign of hidden potential. It means that other people have recognized a capacity for growth in you that you are not aware of yet. And so I would start by saying if other people believe in you, it's probably time to believe them.
And you can watch Adam Grant on our new episode of Person to Person tonight on the CBS News app. And that's tonight's CBS Evening News. I'm Nora O'Donnell. Good night.